buttons on the tables. So when you ask your question, we'll be taking hand-raising questions too, obviously. When you ask your question, you can push the button on the table there, and that way people online will be able to hear you. Let's see here. You guys are welcome to tweet. I think that's it, right? Oh, if you guys don't want your picture taken, take the time now to move to the back of the classroom. And now just a quick introduction here. This is Dr. Lucas Blair, and he's the founder of Little Bird Games, LLC, a serious game development company, which specializes in educational and therapeutic games. He received an MS in Instructional Technology from Bloomsburg University and a PhD in Modeling and Simulation from the University of Central Florida. His doctoral research explored the use of video game achievements to enhance player performance, self-efficacy, and motivation. And I'm going to pass it over to him.
Hello, can everybody hear me? I don't know about the people at the live stream, but okay, cool. So yeah, I'm Lucas Blair, I guess Dr. Lucas Blair, but Lucas is fine. And yeah, I'm going to be giving you guys kind of a playthrough of, I try to use the game terminology there, a playthrough of kind of how we got started at Little Bird Games. When they sent me the original, the invite for the thing, and they titled the talk before I had any input on it, it was like, how to start a game company, or something like that. That is not what I'm going there's no way I can give you guys a play-by-play, because I can tell you 2.5 years, I've been doing this for 2.5 years, that's how long the company's been around. And I know more than when I started, but I still don't know what I'm doing. So I'll qualify everything with that. But I'm gonna basically tell you guys, just kind of share how we got started, what we've worked on for the past 2.5 years, what we're starting to work on now, and then maybe just some general lessons learned. And then at the end, I'm gonna just open it up for questions. I'm sure you guys will have a couple, hopefully anyway. So yeah, so my story, and Bobby went over most of it there, but, and even as a precursor to this, I've always been a gamer. I continue to be a gamer. I was up late last night playing Hearthstone instead of working on these slides, so if any of you kicked my butt last night, that's awesome. But so yeah, so I've always been a gamer. I've always been interested in games. I didn't know that I wanted to make games, I think, until in between undergrad and master's. So my undergraduate degree was actually in biology and anthropology. I went to Bloomsburg, and I spent most of my time playing Diablo and Counter-Strike and not necessarily learning a lot about biology and anthropology, but I did actually graduate. I got into the master's program in instructional technology because I was very interested in teaching people things. It never really occurred to me that you could teach people with games until I actually kind of thought about it for a while. And you know, any game that you play, you learn to play it really well, right? I'm sure everybody in here can probably draw, those of you that have played Counter-Strike, for example, you could probably draw some of those maps from memory. Or you could take me step by step through a fight in World of Warcraft, right? So like how we killed Ragnaros. And it occurred to me that if we could figure out ways to use mechanics like that, but do them for real life things, you could teach people some pretty interesting stuff. So after I got my master's degree, I wanted to go work at actual game companies. So I applied to Valve and Blizzard and all those places. I went to GDC. I begged and pleaded for jobs, and they got no, because at the time I hadn't really made any games. I made a couple for school, but I always ask people always say, how do you get into the games industry? And I don't know. I had to get a PhD and start my own company. So if that's one of the questions later, I don't know. If you figure out a way, tell me. But the answer that I always got from people that were in the industry was make games, which is kind of a crappy answer. Like, because how do you, but that was always the answer. And now that I've been doing it for a long time, that kind of is the way to get started and get in. Just start making games. Start simple. Start with board games, card games, make stuff with your friends. Play a lot of games too. That's essential, which probably isn't hard for most of you. So I couldn't get jobs in any game companies, so I got a job as an instructional designer, which is not anywhere close to being a game designer. It was teaching people things, basically. Not the most stimulating design environment. But so eventually I kind of hopped from job to job, and I went from being instructional designer to simulation designer, which was kind of cool. I got to make flight simulators, battleship simulators, submarine simulators, and we used, so we ended up using a lot of game engines because I was familiar with what entertainment games we're doing with this kind of thing. So for example, we used the GEC engine. For anybody that's ever played Fallout, we used the GEC engine to create a ship simulator, a submarine simulator. So things like that. So that was part of the, some of that was like the closest I got at the time to actually making something that was a game. Well, and then eventually I got a job at a place called Retro Lab at the University of Central Florida, which was a lab down there dedicated to making games. But they made educational games. So it was an awesome fit. So I started as a game designer there and worked there for probably about like 2 or 3 years while I worked on my PhD. And the PhD was in modeling and simulation. And we worked on some really cool projects at Retro, and I'm not going to show any of those today, but we did some awesome stuff. I mean, so it was a lot of everything from platformers to like full 3D. Like I said, we used the GEC engine. We did board games. We did all kinds of interesting stuff. And so that's kind of how I learned how to like function within a in a game company-ish, because it was a lab, so it was probably 15, 16 people, and it was a lot of people that with insane, because you need a lot of different skill sets to make games. So like the trifecta is typically designer, programmer, artist. But then if you're making educational games, you also need instructional designers, maybe some human factors psychologists, maybe we have story writers that we work with now, and there's a whole bunch of different kinds of programming. So yeah, I finished my PhD and then I got a job as a game designer at a place. I was Dr. Lucas Blair. I had some credentials. I worked at a game company for 3 years and I got a job and my title was game designer. And I didn't make any games. I worked there for like 8 or 9 months, and this is something, one of the lessons learned, and this is more of a personal lesson learned than a business kind of thing, but game design is a kind of a buzzword right now. It's popular. People maybe have heard the term gamification. There's a whole, so people like game designers, but not everybody likes game designers or wants a game designer on staff to be able to make games necessarily. So sometimes they want you to make the thing that they're doing more fun by sprinkling game mechanics on it, or maybe they want you to trick people into using their product because you put a thing in it that is interesting to them. So something to think about. So anyway, I got a job as a game designer, didn't get to make any games. I wasn't very happy. And so at a certain point, and this was in late 2011, I decided to make a company. And my wife actually co-founded, my wife Danielle co-founded the company with me. She's a game artist, so it was a nice, a good person to start with. So we had 2 out of the 3 in the trifecta that you need, right? But so yeah, I got on the internet. It's amazing how easy it is to actually make a company. When I decided to do it, like that same day I got online, we were an LLC, made up a company name, Little Bird Games. There's a whole bunch, so the origin of the name, there's a whole bunch of reasons why it was called that, but the real one is this is kind of a sissy reason maybe, but it was an Emily Dickinson poem. I won't recite it here for you because I think it's outside of the scope of the talk, but yeah, so we literally made a company online, registered it, had business cards made. I found a picture of a fat chickadee and traced it. That is how we got a logo. Everybody always says they love our logo, and it's like, what company made that for you? That's great. It was a picture of a fat bird, and I traced it. It was a funny picture because they get all like kind of pudged down. So yeah, humble beginnings, right? So then I had a company. Now what, right? Because I didn't know anything about the business side of having, because like I can make games. That's the easiest part of my day, honestly. It's the part that I like the most. But when you actually start a business, I think a lot of people, at least me, I didn't know anything about how to find business, how to, this is like day 2. Like day 1, it's like, we did it, we have a logo. And then like the next day, you're like, crap, what now? So like, yeah, like you kind of have to learn those things as you're doing them. So when someone says about taxes, payroll, finding new business, doing all those things that businesses have to do, you're literally like jumping off a cliff and building a plane on the way down, trying to figure out how to get, and you just, at least that was my story. Maybe some people are very qualified with when they start. But so yeah, we were founded in late 2011 with a kind of a focus on, I wanted to make educational games. Something interesting that we started doing at the lab and at UCF that I had experience with was actually making therapeutic games. So using game mechanics, for example, to I'll just give you guys a quick example. So imagine playing a stealth game where you would sneak up on people and you would listen to their thoughts and identify automatic thoughts that are the kind of things that people who are suffering from PTSD have. You would replace those automatic negative thoughts with a positive logical thought inside the actual game, and then that was the game. It's a stealth game. You have to change people's attitudes. That's what they do, and that's one of the parts of cognitive behavioral therapy, right? So we just took a really complex psychological thing and then made it a game mechanic, threw some stealth stuff at it, and then had a dude in the hood that looked like the Assassin's Creed guy, and like that was the game, right? So that's an example of a therapeutic game, and then also badges, because my dissertation was on building achievement systems, and you guys probably all have, or many of you have, Xbox achievements or trophies, or I know PlayStation's trophies. So you guys are probably familiar with the term achievements. I always thought the entertainment gaming industry didn't do a very good job of making achievement systems. Usually they make the game, and then at the end, you have to have a certain amount of achievements to get in the. For example, to get an Xbox Live, you have to have a certain number of achievements in your game. It's a requirement. So a lot of times they make their game, and then at the end they just kind of drop them in at thing, So if you've earned achievements in games that seem kind of meaningless, or like, yeah, I got a thing because I beat a boss, those systems aren't very. I didn't think they were very well designed, and because we were making educational games and therapeutic games, it seemed to me that we should be maybe putting more thought into those things, because you can absolutely demotivate people, or for anybody that's ever got an achievement that made you mad, that would be a horrible thing to have happen in an educational game or a therapeutic game. So that was kind of our start, and then that day 2 happened, and we had to figure out what the heck we were actually going to do. So we started entering into competitions. So you guys are probably familiar with, there's a lot of grants and stuff, but there's a new model called, it's a challenge kind of thing, where they'll put out a call and you'll get a small amount of money to maybe build a prototype or something. So we entered one of those for the DML competition, which was the Digital Media and Learning Badges for Lifelong Learning competition, and we were a finalist in it. So that was like the first thing we actually got to build as a company. We made a thing called Badge Forge, which was a way to make, the terminology they use is badges, gamers call them achievements, but it was a way to quickly make badge or achievement artwork, all the criteria, all the things you would have to do, and then maybe put those out into the world. And so one of the projects we're working on now, and I'll talk about it later, is actually building achievement systems and to some degree like skill trees in role-playing games, but for real life. So like running a class or running a business, or we'll talk about it. But so this was our first actual project, right? We got to fly somewhere. We got to present the idea. We worked on it all summer. We were a finalist. We were unfunded, but it was like our first success, which maybe ended up in, we didn't get $1 million out of it, but we actually made a thing as a company. It was the first time I actually had to hire people to do something, which was crazy. I had to get a lawyer and get contractor agreements made up, right? Independent contractor agreements. I had to do all these things we had to get an accountant. I never had to have an accountant before. So all this stuff happened kind of for those first couple months. And then we actually got a job with some friends we had at UCF later that summer to make, this was a training game for PTSD. So you would essentially, it was a way to train psychologists to go into situations when they're deployed to be able to have conversations with people. And the inspiration for this room, by the way, for anybody that's a World of Warcraft nerd, if you ever played in the original World of Warcraft, there was a quest for triage where you had to get bandages. Tell me somebody in here actually did this quest. Okay, so we got some nerds in the room, good. And I know Bart, but so in the original quest, you had to go in and you had to do triage. You had to bandage a bunch of people up, and you had to maybe let certain people go or give certain people more attention. So that was kind of the inspiration for this. So you would get dropped into a situation, and you had to evaluate a room full of people by quickly interviewing them and assessing their condition, but it was psychologists doing it. And then that was the nerdy inspiration for that. So that's why playing games is important. They can inspire you to make those, right? But so this was our second project. This was a cool thing we got to make. It was put out, and again, it was a way to train psychologists to deal with PTSD stuff, to identify people, and then give them some treatment actually in the game through the therapy that they would give. So this is one of the smaller projects that so this was like our second project-ish, but to me it wasn't like an official project because I knew these people from UCF, so it was like a gimme. Like I wanted to go out and I had to find a client, right? So, this is another way to stay busy. In the beginning, if we didn't necessarily have clients always, we would just make games. And that's one of the pieces of advice I'll give you guys at the end. So, spoiler alert. If you don't have a client, or if you don't, this is part of that just make games thing. I didn't know what that meant. Like, a guy from Blizzard told me that. Well, like, the best way to get in the industry is make games. That's, what? I didn't know what that meant. But, like, I just made this over a weekend, and then we put it into classrooms to test it out. This is a board game for natural selection evolution, right? Most of you in here could probably make games like this. This is like not great, me and Illustrator and then printing stuff out and playing with stuff, but you essentially move around the board. Everybody starts with the same character. You move through time. The mechanics are natural selection, so with mutation, gene flow, genetic drift, and your creatures actually change as you go through it. At the end, you count your offspring, and that's how the winner is. That's how you win the game, and that's what survival of the fittest means, right? Number of offspring. So, like, this is just an example of something, and then we just put it into classrooms. But then when someone asks, because when you guys, even if you guys try to go get a job as a game designer, no one's ever going to ask you what grade you got. Because I was a solid C student. No one's ever going to ask you that. I've never been asked anything. They're going to ask you, what have you made? What have you done? Show me. And if the answer is, well, I'd like to get a job with you so I can make something, it's not going to work. So at the very least, stay busy. If you guys have ideas for games, but maybe don't have an artist or a programmer, or maybe you are a programmer but don't have an artist or a designer, just start making stuff. So this is an example of me being bored over a weekend and just making something. So this was the first Little Bird Games board game. So we make board and card games as well. So so then we got another game, another series of games, and we're actually working on these now. And this was, they started like a year ago. So for the first year, we didn't do a whole lot. It was a lot of panic and confusion and being very proud that I had business cards, but maybe not having a lot of work. By the second year, we started to actually get some actual clients in. So this was a set of games, and we're still working on these now. It's a series of 9 games. They're therapeutic. They're for ADHD. So it's a set of arcade games that actually target working memory stuff. And they're all themed differently. The game mechanics themselves are absolutely insane because it's stuff for working memory, and then we get to come up with cool ways of theming them. So this one is like hacking into safes. It's kind of like the in BioShock when you would hack the doors, similar to that. Or the other one's like the alien theme. This one's a shooting gallery. So, but yeah. So this is one of our other projects we got to work on. Then we decided to do a Kickstarter. I don't know if anybody's ever done a Kickstarter before, but we had this idea, and this was our first internal project, and we're still actually working on it now. We just, hey, Kickstarter's a new thing. That seems like a way to make money, or a way to get a project out there. Because a lot, everything that we do for the most part is making a game for someone else. They come to us, they say, hey, we want to teach this thing. Okay, and then we'll figure it out. But this is an idea that we had. I think it was because my wife and I saw a documentary about how honeybees are not doing well. So we watched that, and we were like, we have to do something, and like my skill set is fairly limited, so I can either move heavy things or donate money or make a game. So in this case, we decided to make a game. So a series of games, actually. We wanted to make a children's book that was an ebook. So as you go through the book, some of the pages actually turn into games. So in this case, you learn about how honeybees raise their young. And so you drop it, and then I think the actual children's book is the story of a bumblebee being raised by honeybees. So the bumblebee has to learn to be a honeybee, and as you go through the story and play the games and learn, you learn along with the bumblebee. So then you become an expert in entomology. And I actually worked with people at Penn State on this. So some of the one of the labs here, you guys have an awesome honeybee lab here. So. I worked with them on this. But yeah, so this was a series of games. And our Kickstarter failed, by the way. If anybody ever wants to know how to run a Kickstarter, I can tell you maybe what not to do. I don't know if we were successful or not. But if you ever do a Kickstarter, one piece of advice I can give you is start like way earlier than what you think you should. It's not, hey, we have an idea, we've made all this stuff, we're gonna start our Kickstarter. At least probably 3 months before that, you need to be already, even if there's nothing out there yet, getting people excited about it, getting people on board, because like I thought this would absolutely, because like how could you lose with a children's book that's about an environmental issue that has games in it? I'm like, and we weren't even asking for that much money. I'm like, we got this, and it didn't work. But so we're actually, this is one of our internal projects that we're working on. So, and it was a Kickstarter failure. This is one of the other mini games that's in the book where you learn about pollen collection. So you're flying over, and it's like an iPad or like a tablet game. So then, like, the mechanic is that as this is interesting, as bumblebees fly, their wings beat and they actually build up a static charge. So that's one of the mechanics. You have to avoid other bees, and you land on flowers and you collect pollen. So, but anyway, so when you want to make games, you end up seeing the world and how can I. When you learn new facts and new things, you figure out how you could turn that into a game mechanic. So as soon as I learned that bumblebees build up a static charge, that's totally a game mechanic, right? It's like Pikachu. So this is another set of games we made, and this is one of one of the ones that was like an actual client. So somebody that I didn't know beforehand. This is somebody came to us and they wanted to make a set of safety games for young kids to teach them to not do certain things in towns. It was like digging up. Kids like to dig, so they would dig up gas pipelines and stuff like that, or electric cables, and like so. It was a series of games that they put in front of these elementary school kids, and so this was one like a little hex grid, and it was basically a way to. And again, the age for this was like young kids. So it's like a little memory game where they have to dig stuff up, and like you have to find, like you want to find certain things and you don't want to find other things. You have to identify flags. Not the kind of game you guys would play on the weekend for fun. It's more of an educational thing for little kids. This is another version of it or another one of those games where we had simulated neighborhoods and the kids had to like identify the things that were like danger, things that were bad, and then so like you can go inside the houses and look for things and identify stuff that would be bad, and then like tell an adult like that's how you submit your stuff, like that's the mechanic. And then this is another one we're working on right now with a university. This is, and if you guys, the art kind of looks like I'm trying to think of the some of the games where they're very conversation driven. So like some of the ones that I think like Bethesda makes, like those kind of things where you're interacting with the environment, and then all of a sudden you zoom in and you talk to somebody. Like the Fallout games kind of do that. And you have these conversations. So one of the things we're interested in is, in those games, you can have these insanely robust conversations with people that go down these crazy pathways. They call them a Christmas tree, because like you start off with like, here's 3 decisions, and like it kind of grows exponentially, where like you can go down one path and be talking about one thing, and then go to another path and talk about something completely random. So we're using those to actually, in this particular thing, it was a way to train nurses to recognize PTSD symptoms. This is another therapeutic thing. Training nurses to recognize PTSD symptoms in patients. And basically they do this through conversations. So it's not necessarily, I wouldn't call this a game, although people that don't necessarily play games, they think this is the most, compared to the PowerPoints they were using, this is like Halo, right? This is the most amazing thing ever. But then I play games, so this isn't necessarily a game to me. But it's taking a piece of game design, a part of game mechanics, or a part of something that we know works, and then putting it into a piece of training. So for this particular thing, it was, we wrote these giant Christmas tree conversations, and you interview people and assess them and figure out what's wrong with them, or maybe what's right with them, and then you can start doing therapy and stuff. And we have there's like little meters and stuff at the top, so it's game-ish. And then one of the other things we're doing, and this is like the most boring slide ever, but so one of the other things you'll find that you have to do is that like there are ways, and this is one of the things I'll talk about in a minute, like finding ways to just stay afloat and find other business and leverage your expertise in ways that maybe isn't necessarily 100% making games all the time, but it's doing, having things to do to occupy your time and to make money in between those places where you're making games or working on internal projects like our children's book. So this is something that came out of my dissertation, actually. There's a huge movement now in education for building badge-based curriculum. So people want to use achievement systems or badges to actually run a class. So if you would go into a class, instead of saying, here's our syllabus, instead it looks more like a skill tree in a role-playing game, right? So you guys play, I'll use World of Warcraft as my example, like I always do. But so any role-playing game, we'll make it a little more modern. Diablo 3. So like when you start playing Diablo 3, you build a character and you make these decisions, and there's this robust skill tree. If anybody's ever played like Path of Exile, that's another amazing example. So instead of a bullet point syllabus, instead you say, well, I want to do this and this and this and this, and you build a character, and the character is you, and those are the things you learn in the class. So like that's game design, right? That's building an achievement system. But so we do it for, we're doing it now for actual curriculum. So we'll go in, learn about a piece of curriculum, like what someone wants to teach. I was just meeting with people last week in Philly. They want to do it, English teachers want to do it for poetry, right? So we're building it's like an RPG skill tree, but for learning poetry, right? So instead of being a level 60 fire mage, you're going to be really good at haikus. But like, and I don't know how that's going to work, but I think it's going to be awesome. Like if I showed up for a class and it was a skill tree, and I could decide what I wanted to learn and kind of specialize, and then maybe have projects with other people who built skill trees that have skill sets that accentuate the things that I want to work on, that would be an awesome class. So again, this is a thing that we do. So we'll go to places now, help them, and this is a consulting thing. So actually, we're making money as a company, but we're still getting to make games, still getting to do cool things, but it's not necessarily always us at home programming, making games. And so I'll tell you about two of the other. We'll go to the next screen because that one's just, I don't know if this one's any more exciting. So that's the end of the picture portion of the presentation. Everything now is bullet points. So two of the projects we're currently working on, and I don't have slides for them because they're being made now. For the badges and the achievement stuff, we're actually we're contracted by Mozilla to do some of their content collection and some of their content creation for what they're calling the Discovery Project, the Pathways Project. So everybody probably knows who Mozilla is. So we're working with them on that and actually building, and it's kind of what I was talking about earlier, building those pathways to get people into jobs or into new thing. And we're literally making skill trees. It's role-playing game design. But we're doing it to get people like, how do I become a web programmer? Well, then that's a skill tree, right? Like build out, and how do you want to specialize, and what kind of character do you want to build? So that's a project that we're currently working on now, which has been awesome. And then we're just starting we started a new project a couple weeks ago. I don't have any screenshots for you. It would be me frantically, the only screenshots would be pictures of me going like this in front of the computer. But so we're actually going to build a college course, but instead of an online course, but instead of it being like click next to continue or here's some stuff you have to read, we're actually going to build it as a graphic novel. So it's a choose your own ending style graphic novel where the panels are a comic book for those of you who aren't familiar with the graphic novel format. But the panels slide in and out of the thing depending on the decisions you make, and it runs parallel to the course content. So you kind of play through the course content on behalf of this person in this story, and you make decisions. So it's kind of like the other thing where I talked about the big Christmas tree of dialogue and things that can happen. So, and then we're also going to be embedding games into it. So the course itself will actually be a graphic novel. And you make decisions and you do things and you're scored based on that. Your profile and your performance in the class will kind of look like a character sheet in a role-playing game where like there's a set of attributes of what, that we're looking for, and you'll be scored and kind of graded on those. So when you log in, it's like, again, using the game design stuff and the game mechanics that we know how to make in games and then incorporating them into something else. So then I just wanted to share, and we'll leave time for questions, just some of the lessons that we've learned. And I touched on these in the, as I was going through the stuff that we've worked on. And I'll elaborate them on a little bit more. I realize now that we have a clicker. Oh well. We're doing this with keyboard. So game design can mean a lot of different careers. So for those of you that are interested in game design, that doesn't necessarily mean going and getting a job at a game company and making games. That's certainly one thing you can do, and that's awesome. I play lots of games, rock on. But you can maybe make games for yourself or find a crazy niche market of people who like the weird, funky board games that you like and the weird subject matter that you like and make games for them, right? There are a lot of people that make board and card games. It doesn't always have to be digital games. So you can just do what we do, and a lot of times it's not just games, it's using what you've learned in game design or how to make games and incorporating that into other things, like making an online course that's a graphic novel that choose your own ending with embedded games, right? To me, that's pretty cool. One of the things that has helped me tremendously is saying yes to helping people. You should do that just because it's nice to do, for starters. But then the kind of semi-selfish thing for doing that is a lot of our business and a lot of the opportunities that we've had have come from saying yes to helping someone out with something. So hey, can you talk to this group, or can you do this thing, or can you look at this for me? Just say yes to people. Say yes to things in general. But just help people out, and you'll be surprised. Don't expect it. So for maybe every 10 people you help, maybe you'll get an opportunity out of those, or maybe every 100 people. But generally, just be nice to people and say yes and help them. But it does actually come back and help you. And then say yes to work, even if it's a little bit over your head. So if we turn down every project where I was fully capable at the start of the project of pulling it off, we would never get any jobs ever. And this is kind of a reoccurring theme. So one of the things I have to do for the Mozilla project is we interview people to ask them how they got into their careers. And then we build that skill tree, that pathway with badges and achievements to figure out how they got there. And one of the reoccurring themes is people who are successful and have interesting jobs, they said yes to something and then figured it out. Like, they didn't figure it out beforehand. They didn't come to it with amazing qualifications. They hadn't done anything like it. They just said yes. And then you do what we do the next day after you say, well, crap, what now? And you just have to figure it out. And you'll find that you will figure it out. You'll be better for it. The project will be fine. It's just, you just have to say yes. When you have a small business, especially, so for those of you that if you wanted to start something or you want to have a small business with just a few of you, you're going to wear a lot of hats and almost none of them will fit. And by saying that, I mean you're going to be spread pretty thin. Like the easiest, like I said, the easiest and best part of my day is game design. That's a tiny, tiny part of my day. Like this morning I was talking to an insurance guy, right? And yesterday I was talking to an accountant about taxes. And 3 days before that I was talking to a lawyer about working on about a contract negotiation. And all these other things that you have to do. And it's okay that you won't necessarily be good at all those things. The nice thing about it is if you do all those jobs to start, and my wife brought this made this point clear to me that like it's good to learn this stuff now because eventually when we're big enough, and the idea is that you want to grow, you want to have a bigger business, you want to be able to delegate to people. When you can delegate, you'll know what jobs you actually have to delegate, right? So the things that actually require a lot of work, maybe the thing you hate doing, maybe the thing that you're least good at. So like, but it's good to do all those jobs. It's good to be spread thin, and like you'll be. To me, it's one of those things where certainly not every company is just going to hit the ground running and make Facebook 2.0, right? Like sometimes you're just going to have to trudge your way through and do a bunch of things wrong and spread yourself thin and figure out what works. So part of that is being comfortable being bad at a lot of stuff and just getting it done. How to stay afloat. So stay busy has been like my mantra from the start. So grants, different kinds of grants, different challenge things, any kind of competition. There's so many competitions for game design or building apps, or people give you a problem and say, hey, fix this. Like that's an awesome thing to work on. And it's a good thing when someone asks you the question, what have you made? You can say, we did this. And if you're lucky enough to be a finalist or actually get money for it, then that's even better. Because that's another thing you can say, well, we were better than all these other people when we did this. Partnerships are always good, so find other people that like the same thing you like, or maybe established companies that are already doing what you like, and ask them if you can work on a thing with them. And then consulting and things like that. So like I teach college courses, we do consulting stuff, we'll do whatever it takes to fill in the gaps to stay afloat. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not a business expert, but like, one of the things that I've learned and from hearing other people talk is that a lot of times it's just about staying alive as a business, like doing whatever you have to do. And if that means, consulting is like, consulting is better. Like, if you guys see me flipping burgers downtown or something, then you'll know that maybe we didn't get a grant or something like that. But like, just do whatever it takes to stay afloat. And that's worked out really well for us, especially the consulting stuff. Expect to hate it sometimes, at least once a month, sometimes once a couple weeks. I'm like, I am done with this. But the rest of the time, you'll absolutely love it and it's worth it. But like there are times when like there'll be a convergence of deadlines and a convergence of all this stuff, and it's hard work. You're never gonna, at least for me anyway, maybe some people start out and they're just awesome from the start. It's a lot of hard work and you will fail more than you succeed. But that's part of the journey. And then don't only focus on making money. So like if we had focused only on money or figuring out how to monetize a thing, then I think we would have turned down a lot of opportunities or contracts or things that actually ended up making us, they made us money, but it was something that, we thought was cool and that we were passionate about. And people get that. Like if you can get excited about the thing that you're making, people totally pick up on that. But instead, I think a lot of people will make a game or make an app or make a tech whatever, and their only focus is how, and then certainly it's from a business standpoint, you want to figure out how to make money off of something, but it shouldn't be the thing that you start with. Like how can we monetize this thing? Especially with games, make a game that you would want to play. That's like rule number one. Would you play this game? Or if you were in the same situation as the people that would be playing your game, or in our case, learning from the game, would this be better than what they're getting now? And if the answer is yes, then you're on the right track. And then spread yourself out and go where the business is. So this is something that, as I said, when we started, I had no idea how to run a business, and I had no idea what would actually work. And I think a lot of people start that way. A lot of times people will make an app, and they think that people will use it one way, or they'll make a game and they'll think that people will use it one way, and if they're actually using it a completely different way, your business model has just changed. This is who you're catering to now. So like that was kind of one of our strategies from the start, was make a bunch of different games, make a bunch of different stuff, do a lot of different things, and kind of spread yourself thin in some cases. And then whatever works, whatever people like, then that's your business. Like when we first started, my expectation is that we would make a lot of educational games and not necessarily therapeutic games. But as it's turned out, the therapeutic side of things is bigger than the educational stuff. I would have never anticipated that. And if I would just, so in our website, we'll constantly be adding another bullet point. And we do this, and also this, and this as well. And it's like this long. So like, and maybe sometimes we'll scratch stuff off. But like, I would have never anticipated that therapeutic games would have been bigger than educational games. But they are. I don't know why necessarily, but they are. So like, that's part of the business now. I didn't anticipate that badges and achievement systems would be big. I picked it for my achievement. I picked it for my dissertation because it was a good excuse to play World of Warcraft and play a lot of games. But as it turned out, there's this huge movement now where people are trying to use badges to teach people things. That's part of our business now. So do a bunch of stuff and just go wherever the money is. Go wherever the actual business is, and also making sure it's something you can enjoy. And I think that's it for, I guess it's like maybe 10, 15 minutes for questions. So if anybody asks how to get into the game industry, I already answered it. I don't know. Yep. And you're supposed to use your mic if you can.
I just want to say, I want to wish your company luck. You're definitely inspiring. But the main question I want to ask, you've kind of showed us like where you're capable of looking at consulting jobs and partnerships and things like that, but how are you actually finding these clients for business?
Okay. So his question was, how do we actually find the clients for the business? I've gotten better at it, I think. Initially, I was like Google search, like, is anyone looking for someone who makes games that are educational? That was not successful. A lot of times it's networking, which I know is like I never really liked the idea of networking. It always seemed kind of, I don't know, there's something about it that I didn't like. And like, I've probably gone through thousands of business cards and gone through like one of the best things that we've done. A lot of times our clients, like, I don't find our clients. I'm trying to think now, like, for the most part, you need to put yourself in a position where your clients can find you. So like, if that means speaking at a thing like this, like maybe someone's watching the live stream and they're like, oh, I want to, teach a thing with a game. So put yourself in a position where your clients can find you. Make yourself known. If that means writing article, and a lot of times that'll be doing stuff for free. That doesn't necessarily mean you're getting paid all the time, but you're doing these things in order to get your name out there so you can get paid. But I think for the most part, our clients find us. Speaking engagements, writing, just helping people with stuff. I mean, like that, and that's part of just making games. Like literally, if you just go find a teacher, find a teacher at a local school. Ask them if you want to make educational games, as an example. Find a subject that they're struggling with and figure out how to use games to make it better. Make them a board game or a card game, or tell them how to make their class better, right? And then that teacher will tell their principal, which will tell somebody else, which will meet somebody at a conference. And to me, like all the weird connections or the people that have approached us, you would have never anticipated. It's like this weird butterfly effect where like they talk to this person, it's like there's 6 degrees, and then Kevin Bacon, and then they talk to a person, and then all of a sudden someone calls us and they're like, hey, can you make a game for a thing? And I'm like, how did you find us? Well, you did this thing. So like, that's part of the saying yes to things too. Like if you just sit at home and try to find, it's never going to work. Put yourself in a situation where people find you. So that seems to be what we've done. Yep.
Yeah, when you talked about the classes and how it would have a specific skill tree that you can go down to.
Yep.
Like, as someone who played World of Warcraft, sometimes you just want to like respec, go to a different skill tree.
Yep.
How would you implement that into the class itself?
Okay, so this is like more of a game design question. So this is good. So he asked if, for example, when we're making the skill trees or the badge or achievement systems for classes, and in games a lot of times you want to respec, right? That means start over again with a new character. In real life, it's difficult to do that because you're working on like a linear timeline. But what people can do, so for example, with the pathways or with the skill trees, at any point you can just pick up another, you pick up another thing. The nice thing is in educational stuff, you will have learned all that stuff to get up to that point. A lot of times what we'll do is we'll have people, and they do this in games too, where like there are core skills that you have to get, and then you branch out and decide. And a lot of times people will go down and if they'll learn the core skills to, to be a biologist or whatever, and then like maybe kind of branch out in entomology and start to do a thing, and they'll be like, no, I don't think I like that. I'm going to try this other thing. I dig trees, so I'm going to do dendrology instead. And go down that. One of the other things we're doing, so for like the online course that's the graphic novel, I want people to respec because I want them to fail. So like you can make poor decisions on behalf of the avatar that you're playing, the character that you're like going through the story as. You can make horrible decisions to see what happens. Like your grade isn't determined by that outcome. Your grade is determined by the number of times that you tried. Things like mechanics like that. So I mean, like, that's the reason we make flight simulators, right? Like, I want someone to know what it's like to crash, but in the simulator, because real planes are expensive. So, like, I want people to respec. I want that, I want that. I want them, especially students, like, I want them to find out what they dig. And, so yeah, we do try to build in, I guess, respecing. That's an interesting way to look at it. Yep. Yeah, I guess there's a...
How big would you say the market is for educational and therapeutic games?
So he asked, how big is the market for therapeutic and educational games? From when I started, it has grown. And when I started, it was probably when I started at RetroLab, I would say. Because I think even like 2006, 2007, like I was working at a job as an instructional designer, and I was trying to convince somebody, they're like, hey, we should start doing games. And they're like, that will never work. No one does that, and now, because there wasn't a lot, for one thing, there wasn't a lot of research on effectively using games for education and therapy, and now, like, that's just common knowledge, yeah, games work. Now it's a question of how do we make good ones that actually do, so the market, I think, is pretty big right now, and, the nice thing is, right now, there's not many players in it, just because most people that are game designers want to make entertainment games and don't think about all the other ways that you can use game design to do awesome stuff. We're still making games. Like, I love the stuff that we build. It's just, I'm not necessarily, working for Blizzard making the next entertainment game. But I think the market is pretty solid right now, and I think it's absolutely growing. I mean, especially because, like, the generation that's growing up now grew up with games. Like, they've never, like you guys have never lived in a time where there weren't games. Where there weren't, and I guess I'm part of the millennial thing. I'm like at the upper, angry old man end of millennials, but so we're in actually the same generation. And like I've never lived in a time when there wasn't Nintendo or Atari, and like I'm used to that. So people, I think it's just going to get bigger because more and more people. That's the language that you guys speak. If I'd have said skill tree 10 years ago, most people would not have known what I was talking about. But now everybody does. And games are becoming more widespread too. So like, say what you want about Candy Crush, but like, my mom's a gamer now. Right? Who would have ever thought that? But like more and more people are learning the language of games, what it means to get a badge or an achievement or level up a character or build a character or care about a score. And so everybody's a gamer now. I mean, take a bus somewhere and you'll see people that are 3 times your age on a phone trying to flick a bird at a pig in a castle. That's awesome, right? So then why can't we figure out ways to use that to teach people stuff? I think to me, the market is just going to keep growing. So, good question. Anybody else?
How much did you actually raise on your Kickstarter?
Oh, geez, I don't even know. I think we were only asking for like, I think it was like 25 or like 25K or something like that. I think we got like maybe 10. It wasn't close. It was like 5 to, yeah. So it was funny. The people that donated were like, this is the best idea ever. And I think it was we didn't do a very good job of getting it out there. Because like we started like maybe a week or two before. And like we had all the art, the story is written, we had all the art, the game designs are done. We just needed to get somebody. The program we're going to use is called Corona. You guys should check it out. I guess free plug for Corona. But not the beer. That too, but like the actual program is called Corona, and think of it as Unity, but for 2D games. So Unity is you can make 3D games and publish any platform. Corona is that, but for 2D games. And you can also make interactive storybooks and novels and stuff, which is something I'm interested in. So like having So yeah, but no, not we need to get like halfway there. If I had to do another one, I think we would do better, just because I learned a lot. A Kickstarter is a lot of work. If for any of you that want to do one of those, it is a full-time job. For however long I think it's either 30 or 60 days, it is a full-time job. Like so, but then hopefully Facebook will buy the thing you did, and if it's following the Oculus Rift, and then you can $2 billion. Oculus Rift's awesome. But I think Bart had a question.
So you talked a little bit about where you go to find business. Where do you go to find your own resources in terms of like subcontracting? If you need someone to do a thing
Yep.
for a project, where do you find those people?
And that was something we really, Bart asked, how do we find people to work on the games? Initially that was a really, really tough. I mean, you kind of have to have, and there are websites that will facilitate that. I mean, there's plenty of places where you can do, and there's just catalogs of people that have certain skill sets or whatever. I haven't ever used any of those. I tend to work with people that I know or recommendations from people. So initially that was really hard. Now I kind of have I don't have a huge Rolodex, but I definitely have a lot of people that I can go to. Most of the games that we make are in JavaScript. So like I know a bunch of people that do JavaScript, and then if we need story writing, I know a story writer or two. I know a bunch of instructional designers just because of the master's program. But that's a really difficult thing, is finding people that you know and can trust, especially when maybe it's the first project you ever work with them on, and you're also promising a client that like we're not going to mess up this thing you gave us money to do. So it's tricky. But I tend to only work with people that either came from a recommendation or somebody that I know personally, and then over time, hopefully your pool of potential candidates grows. But yeah, initially it was like, who do I know that can program? So yeah, that's a tricky. So if any of you know JavaScript, let me know. Any other questions? Yep.
I noticed on your website you only have like 6 people listed, including yourself. Do you have more employees than that, or is it just you 6?
It's more than that, but almost everybody is an independent contractor. Because and this is part of working in an academic game lab, like there's this weird waxing, waning cycle of, we got a grant, we're rich, and then a couple of months later you're like, the grant's spent, we're broke. And then so when I worked in the defense industry making this flight simulators and stuff, when they go through that cycle, it's, you're all hired, you're all fired, you're all hired, you're all fired. And it's like the most depressing thing. And I wanted to avoid that, so like for now anyway, and we're still relatively new. I mean, we've been around for 2.5 years, but the first year of our business, we were just some people with a website. And when I say we, it was my wife and I and a cat. She was a big cat, but she couldn't program. And like, so yeah, I mean, we've since grown. There's a lot, we probably have, that number's probably really right now currently double that. But part of that is I don't do a very good job updating the website when we get new people, because then we usually hire people for just one project. Now some of those projects will last for a year, but sometimes it's like, hey, we got to rock this thing out in 3 or 4 months, and we're not at a point now as a business where it's sustainable that I can say all of you are employees. And another thing, and this is something I should have maybe had in what we've learned, you need to figure out ways to stay lean. I think there are other talks about that this week. Like there's good books on it's like the Bootstrapper's Bible, or like the Art of the Start. Like, we don't have a home office, or we don't have an office space, I should say. I have a home office. I don't want an office. Everybody works from home. People are in different states, different countries. The person I work with from Mozilla is from Scotland. The internet's kind of this awesome thing where like you can work with people. That's one of the things that makes it easier to find people, is I don't have to find people where I live. If I did, it'd be in trouble. I can work with people anywhere. So, that's part of the staying lean thing and not spending money you don't have to, is office space is expensive. So we just rock out Google Hangouts for the most part, and like it's been pretty effective. So, but yeah, yeah, I think you want to do one more question, or I don't know if it's available. Otherwise, we're out of time. So, another speaker? Okay. We're going to close it up then. Thank you all very much.